Hi.
Hi, I'm Kristen Baldwin from Entertainment Weekly, and I'm here with Handmaid's Tale and newly minted Emmy nominee Joseph Fine.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here today and enduring all of that horror. Thank you.
So we have so much to discuss. You know, Fred is a character who could come across as just purely a bad guy, but we also see that he's conflicted in some cases about, you know, his beliefs and the rules he's helped create. As an actor, how do you manage to convey enough of that conflict so that he doesn't become just a one-dimensional, you know, quote-unquote bad guy?
It's been a challenge. He's somewhat thinly described in the book, and of course it's all quite rightly seen through Offred's perspective. But I guess I started in terms of unraveling the character with the book and Offred's observations of him, and namely the fact that the previous Offred handmaid had taken her life because of what she had been through. So that, I felt, gave me a clue to the predator that was in Fred. So, but you have this sort of bipolar aspect with him, and a lot of bipolar in Gilead, which is the regime, what it stands for, the party line, but also this man that wants to make amends with the new handmaid, not put her through the horror that he did previously, partly because his life depends on it if it got out, and also because he's human and he doesn't necessarily want to put her through the pain and seeing her take her life. I think that had a big fallout with the household previously, but also he can't help himself but be a predator, and he's a man that is weak and pathetic, as a lot of bullies are, and given the power that he has in this regime, when he feels his masculinity is taken away or his intelligence is questioned or belittled, out comes the monster. So there's a sort of bipolar, this man that I feel fundamentally is cognizant of the moral dilemma and conflict that he is in, but loves power and has found his position, is getting comfortable with the way that power is corroding himself. He's kind of like Macbeth in a way. I feel like he's gone so far that he can't go back. It's almost easier to keep on than to go back and redress the past.
And, you know, you mentioned the book, you read the book as part of your research. Did you look at the movie as well? I'm always interested to know when characters have been portrayed, you know, by other actors. Is it, obviously that was a very different version, but is that something that you wanted to see or you know, intentionally avoided?
I avoided it. I did see a kind of 2-minute clip when it was Bruce first came to me and said, would you like to do this? I hadn't read the book, so I went away to look at the book, and then I did take a few seconds to watch a clip, and I knew, no, I don't want to watch this. I admire the actors. It felt of a different time and period, and a different Fred to me, and so I wanted to have ownership of my Fred, if you like. So I didn't want to dwell on it. I felt the book had enough clues. There are wonderful clues of Offred describing the commander as this soft, pathetic limb that lives inside a military boot. So I love that kind of metaphor. So all the sort of double sided breast suits that he wears, and the desk, and the armor that he has, and sometimes I wear military boots under my suit. So it's sort of hiding and disguising and camouflaging the weak, pathetic predator that lives beneath.
And it's interesting in this episode, you know, we see that Serina in the past, before Gilead had really taken hold, she was kind of the driving force, and then after she was attacked, Fred sort of, for lack of a better term, manned up and got some vigilante justice, but you could tell it really took a toll on him.
Well, I think that's fascinating about this particular episode, is that we get a glimpse of how powerful Serina was and what a voice she was, and how Fred loved her voice and her strength, and how sad it was that the future should be one where her voice is taken away. And in that particular episode, what I loved tapping into or just beginning to explore was the sense of masculinity. And when Fred at the hospital shows his, for want of a better description, his feminine side, his emotional side, he's shut down by her masculine side, and the repercussions of which is that he really shuts down that more emotional, in tune part of Fred and seeks revenge and mans up. And so you see with the beginnings of how Fred is weirdly forged by that one comment by Serina. I think there are other elements, but it was fascinating that he manned up, but in the most sad, cruel, and peculiar way that he would take a life and revenge, albeit because that's justice, but really it's about covering the hurt, the emotional hurt that he showed his wife, and a sense of an emotional side, and felt severely bruised by that.
So I read in one interview you talked about you will sometimes write long emails to the showrunner, Bruce Miller,
Poor thing. It's
to
not
discuss.
Like he's got so much work to do, and there's me writing these emails.
And you're discussing Fred and the show. What kind of things do you reach out to him about, and sort of how is this a part of your process in terms of helping create the character?
I guess in many ways, as abhorrent and nasty and evil Fred is, I have to defend parts of him. And there's been a couple of moments in episode 9. We had a moment where Fred was going to rape after meeting Luke, raped Serina in a hospital, in a hotel room straight after, and it just didn't track for me, and I had to go out on a limb and refuse to do it, because I felt that even though Fred is who he is, he's human, and I think that he would be reeling from the interaction with Luke, and that suddenly the reality comes face to face with him, and he would be digesting that and trying to understand it, and he wouldn't necessarily be switched on by being in Canada in a new hotel and trying to heavily persuade his wife to do something that she wouldn't want to do. So that was long emails and defending and pushing and feeling that Yvonne had tracked Serina so beautifully, that her disenfranchisement with the regime and Fred was so beautifully charted, it didn't need a heavy scene to kind of suddenly push her over the edge. So I love the nuance. It's really about battling for human nuance within a very dark character.
I'm interested to hear that you really stuck up for him and for Fred and said, I won't do this, but, as a performer starting out in your career, would you have had, felt empowered to do something like that? Or have you come up against that situation in the past where you were being asked to do something that you didn't feel made sense, but you didn't feel like you had the sort of authority to say, I'm going to take a stand on this one?
I feel that, yes, when you're young, it's very difficult to feel you have the authority or the chance to say this doesn't track. I guess I feel, putting authority aside, it's more about, I feel like I really, as dark and complex and heinous and horrible as he is, I feel like I really know Fred. So I felt I had to defend a person whose actions and thoughts I knew just as well from my own selfish point of view. So it's really about defending the character. I've always kind of tried to defend the characters, but probably not to that degree where I've pretty much refused to do a scene. But the great thing about Bruce Miller, our showrunner, he's so collaborative, he's so switched on, he so listens and trusts the actors that he's given, and the rest of the writers, really that platform. So it's less about authority and more about a wonderful respect of the collaborative process. And that's what's been really joyous about working with Hulu and Bruce and our fellow actors, is that, and Lizzie, I exchanged long emails with her about scenes when we do them or before we do them. There's just a love and a care, and I think we all feel a great responsibility in many ways to this extraordinary novel that has been opened up, that has kind of caught the political zeitgeist and movement of today, and we feel a great responsibility towards that. So I guess it's just feeling that responsibility.
So this is obviously a very dark world to inhabit. It's a very dark world to watch. You know, sometimes viewers say they have to like take a breather and watch Cupcake Wars or something afterwards. So as a performer, some performers are able...
I might do that. Thanks for the tip.
It's a good palate cleanser. Some performers are able to sort of shake off a role as soon as, you know, the day wraps. Are you able to? And if not, what do you do to detox from a long day in Gilead?
It's difficult to detox while I'm working. 7.5 months, I'm pretty immersed in Fred, and it's not a happy place. I found last season, episode 10 of 2, horrible, and the last ceremony, abhorrent, and that's just me. I wonder what it's like for Lizzie and Yvonne, but I didn't want to do that again. I don't want to go there again. I genuinely felt repulsed and disturbed, and it's kind of, he's a wonderful character, but there's little escape when we're working. I guess when I'm away, I live in Europe, and my family is everything, and so it's really home, and domesticity is the one thing, like genuine, beautiful, compassionate love is what brings me back in a great way.
So you don't like go back to your house and play Candy Crush or something where you're just like, you just got to turn your brain off a little bit?
I don't touch board games, not even Jenga. But just long walks with the kids and trampoline and gardening, that's what gets me out. Yeah.
So obviously you come from a very artistic family. You know, your family has actors, directors, writers, photographers, composers. When did you first develop an interest in acting? Like, what was your first taste of it, and when did you start taking it as, you know, something that you wanted to do as a career?
Say artistic family, I say a very warped gene pool. But what was the question? I got when an actor gets a laugh, they're kind of like, they're completely sidetracked.
It was when did you first discover your interest in acting?
Yeah, I knew exactly where I was. I was 8 years old in a South London comprehensive school, and there was a play, and I got cast by my English teacher in a play, and I felt like I'd been picked up by the scruff of the neck and dropped off in the right department, and I was at home. And it was a very early age. We do a funny thing every Christmas, which is called charades, and so that's kind of since 0. We've been doing that a lot. But really it was that moment where I was given permission by the teacher to inhabit a world which felt like home.
And I would assume that it was something that was not necessarily a surprise to your parents, or were they at all just like, another one, or what?
From 8 to when I auditioned for drama school, and I was and in auditioning to drama school, I went to the National Theatre and I got a job as a dresser for 4 years, which is essentially, picking up people's underpants and socks and washing them and delivering them, or meeting them stage left for the quick change and their coffee and cigarettes. Cigarettes at that time, it was the 80s. But I got a really good handle on what it was, and a handle on the discipline of an actor, and that's something my mum's essentially was full of, that you do what you want, but as she said, you got to get your guts into it. So I always knew it wouldn't matter whether you're a surgeon, a plumber, mechanic, an actor, you've got to be disciplined, and that was the big sort of ethic in growing up. The huge love of the arts. My mother was a novelist and a painter, was surrounded by books and that kind of stimulus, but it was essentially, it wasn't a kind of relaxed bohemian kind of fun place. It was real discipline. If you're going to do it, put everything into it, dedicate your life to it.
So I want to talk about another role. We talked a little bit about this upstairs. You played Monsignor Timothy Howard in the second and best season of American Horror Story, Asylum. And your character was, and this is not everything that happened to him, but raped by the devil, seduced by Jessica Lange, and also nailed to a cross. So just, I mean, what was that like going to work every day?
Just an average Tuesday, you know. That's the sort of thing that should happen to Fred, I think. But you know what's interesting about Asylum and really Ryan Murphy? Ryan Murphy got me into television. I'd always wanted to do theatre. I went to drama school, only wanted to do theatre. So being here is by virtue of my love of theatre. But Ryan Murphy got me into television. We did a film called Running with Scissors, and then he wrote a pilot for me called Pretty Handsome, which was about a man transitioning into a woman over a period of 5 seasons. But it was too bold back then for FX, and we just made the pilot. But then I understood really good quality TV is where it's at, and I love film. I love Tarkovsky, Hitchcock, name the greats. But it gave me an understanding just that the production level that you can find in television is extraordinary. And maybe I got lucky here at the golden time of television, the golden age. But it was always kind of referred to in a derogatory way as the small screen. I think the small screen now is the iPhone, and actually the TV is like cinema. So I learned pretty early on that this is actually a stunning and wonderful medium when you have brilliant minds like Murphy. And so that was a lovely crossover point doing American horror and getting back with Ryan.
But nailed to a cross, like, what's that shooting day like? I mean, that seemed very traumatizing.
I think it was Ian McShane that nailed me to a cross. A very cathartic moment for me. It's kind of fun. It's the second time I've been nailed to a cross. I did a play for the Royal Shakespeare Company. I went there to do Shakespeare, but the plays that I loved the most are the plays that no one knew. They were new plays, and not the plays that everyone sort of mumbled the lines as you were speaking your soliloquies along with you on the front line with a book. And one of those plays was called Son of Man, and it was a Dennis Potter play. Again, Dennis Potter, a great champion of television, singing detective, Pennies from Heaven with the great and late Bob Hoskins. I was nailed to a cross in that show. I played Jesus Christ in a play that was actually in the 50s. They tried to ban it because it was the first time Christ had been portrayed on stage, but portrayed with doubt. And I love the idea that a man that wanted to come back to earth as a man should thereby be subject to all the kind of conditions that the human nature is subject to, and one of them is doubt. And so I love that, but that was something in the 50s people couldn't really get their head around. But that was a great play, and it was lovely being nailed every night for 3 months to the cross. Yeah.
Well, when because the Ryan Murphy production is so very, he works with the same group of actors a lot. There's a sort of a repertory theater feeling to it. What did you take from that experience, moving forward into other TV or film projects?
That working with Ryan and Jessica and she's a brilliant, powerful actress, and is just just working with talents like that was a big takeaway for me. And also the imagination of television and where it can take you over years, and the kind of character development over years was something which was really lovely to get into. I love film, but we're all so sophisticated now with the 3 acts of film, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and we know the twist while we're in 20 minutes in. And so I love that television is a whole new landscape to explore.
And you've had such a wide range of TV in your career. You've worked for premium cable, traditional broadcast, and now streaming. I'm interested from a performer standpoint. Do those different work environments, are they different as a performer? Are the paces quicker in for example, streaming versus broadcast, or how does it work in terms of the environment that you're in when the product is on a different platform?
Not so much. It's pretty much 9 pages a day, roughly, whether it's network or streaming. You get the scripts last minute. I mean, that's pretty much the same. What is really different is fear. With the networks, there's fear. With the networks, there's the ratings. With the networks, there's numbers and figures, and it comes from the sort of the suits down to the creative people on the floor, and it really messes with the process. What I love about cable is it doesn't rely on those figures, and thereby there's not that sense of fear. And even more so with the streaming. I haven't felt it. I felt working with Hulu this time around is the most extraordinary, free, liberating, creative process that's uninhibited by figures and numbers. So I love that transition. And I felt that the networks, some of them do extraordinary television, but they do live in fear. And that can really mess with the process.
Sure. So this is a question from the audience. How has The Handmaid's Tale affected the way you view women in today's society, and has it made you more determined to stand up for women's rights?
Yes.
Good answer.
I mean, the three most important people in my life are my wife and two daughters. And to me, it's definitely changed my attitudes to what they have been through, are going through, and might go through. And so I feel very much switched on to the conversation going around me in that regard. And I've seen my mother, who was a creative force, but up against, in a very male-dominated world, up against things that if she were alive today, she would be flourishing. I think of my sisters. Both my sisters are film directors. Just now, they're getting more recognition than ever before, and that shouldn't be the case. So it's slow, but you know, opportunities, level playing field. You know, it's important. It's really switched my antennae onto a very, very pertinent and necessary conversation.
I'm interested too, though, how fans approach you, because you're so good at being Fred, who is so difficult in so many ways. Like, are women giving you dirty looks when you walk down the street, or what's because people love the show, but they probably hate your character.
Quite rightly. Did someone say yes, like they wanted to kill me? Okay. It's only when I start to grow the beard do people start to get a bit switched on to whether they don't like me. And I'm free of that. As soon as I rap, literally, as soon as I hear rap on the last day, I'm straight to my shaving off, getting a short buzz cut haircut. But I haven't had, I mean, generally people just love the show. I think they kind of get it that I'm not really him. Thank God. I do get odd, curious looks, like I know him and he's done something bad in my life. It's very disconcerting, and I get that more than someone actually coming up and saying, you know,
like, you're a jerk.
Yeah, you're a jerk, or no Starbucks here, get out. Yeah.
So another question for you is, what about this series or this role has been the most challenging and the most rewarding for you?
This season, this role, the big challenge is finding and fighting for the nuance that makes him human. However much an ugly character he is, he's human, because there are a lot of these type of predators or power-hungry bullies out there, and as much as we don't want to have to entertain them, we need to look at a particular part of the male psyche within the feminist conversation. And that also, as a character, ups the protagonist's game. If they're intelligent, nuanced creeps, that makes their journey much tougher, and us, as an audience, a more complicated discussion. So I'm up for battling for the human nuance as much as I can. But then Fred is the face of Gilead and has to be a sort of a device for people to bump up against, the protagonists to bump up against. So I'm aware of the need of what he facilitates. And the most exciting part is really being in a show that everyone that you're involved in loves, that all departments from design to editing to camera work to acting to producing and directing and writing are on the top of their game, and every department is converging at the same time within the moment of the sort of big political zeitgeist movement. And so you don't really get to ride that wave too often, maybe once in a career. So I guess the biggest thrill is being part of a big conversation of a show which people really care about and feel that it is speaking to a moment in their life.
All right, so 2 final questions. One, this is a safe space. These are all actors here.
My friends.
Tell me about your worst audition ever.
We're going to be here a long time. I have a funny story. It always makes me laugh. It probably won't make you laugh. You go, why did he say this? But it was actually a friend of mine that I was working with in an Arthur Miller play. He was a lovely actor, and he said he went to a party and he was there having a beer, and this lady was looking at him and kind of laughing and looking at him, and he thought, oh, she must know me as an actor from a show. And he said, hi. And she said, hi. And he went, do you know me from something? She said, yes. And he said, was it a show I've been on? And she went, no. And she said, whenever my husband and I are really depressed, we put on your audition tape. and I said, what was it? He said it was for sort of, I don't know, chicken nuggets or something. And he said that he had to do a spontaneous song and dance, and it was so bad that he started singing and dancing. The door was open with a broomstick, and he danced out off camera, down the stairs, the camera panned, and he didn't come back. It was just a sublime piece of comedy. But and I'm sure there are a lot of couples out there who, when they get depressed, put on a Joe Fiennes audition. I'm sure it goes on.
That was an excellent story / evasion. And finally, can you tell us what's the best advice you've ever received about acting?
Well, for stage, listen. My first job was a kind of gothic ghost story called The Woman in Black, a Victorian kind of Poe-like tale in the West End, and it was 6 grueling months straight out of drama school to doing a West End show for 6 months. It was like a shock. And I was with a lovely old actor called Edward Petherbridge, and he would test me all the time. And we had to mime a dog, and I remember the dog was always this height, but one day it was a Great Dane, and the next day it was a Jack Russell, and he would stop the show and say, forgive me, I've left my umbrella at the stage door, and he would leave me on stage with an audience for like 10 minutes. They were all sort of, I'm going to show this young actor what to do, you know. But he did give me one piece of advice, which was, especially doing a long show in terms of theatre, which was, you know, you have to listen. Don't ever stop listening to your fellow actor, because doing a long show, you can end up thinking about the shopping list. And so, listen was the great key word for me.
Well, that's excellent. Thank you so much for being here in The Handmaid's Tale Season 2.
Thank you for coming in today.
On Hulu. Thank you.